it's okay to talk about sex and it's okay to have sex.
Mm,
Because again, I had so much shame whenever I was having sex in college. I'm like, fuck, I shouldn't be doing this.
I
Like,
need to be married.
I do believe owning your sensuality taps into that political because again, you're owning your body and you're taking back that power and that pleasure because pleasure is political.
I think this is where, as we gather together, as we continue to meet each other, have conversations, be in spaces with each other, we can mirror what it's like to be free, which is another form of resisting.
Exactly. And again, owning that pleasure,
Mhm.
um, taking back that power.
Sabrosura pa' ti que qué.
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, your host of Cafe con Pam, the bilingual podcast exploring stories that inspire Latine and people of the global majority to embrace their voice, challenge calladita culture, and step into their power. Aquí en Cafe con Pam, we celebrate those who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. El día de hoy tenemos una conversación with Lorena Rodríguez Banda. Lorena is a founder of the P Files, which is a sex positive newsletter that touches on the stigma and taboo subjects of sexual pleasure and health that Latinas and other BIPOC women face. This newsletter also aims to redefine what it looks like for women to run for office and wanting to work in politics. Lorena is also an electoral campaign trainer, facilitator, and strategist. She's an experienced professional in grassroots organizing, government reproductive justice, and in the femtech sex tech industry. Lorena también has led and managed several electoral campaigns across the US, including New York City, Miami, and Texas. She's facilitated several electoral campaigns, trainings, and workshops to help women run for office and work in politics. Lorena is a former board member of Menstrual Rights Global and a proud daughter of two hardworking Mexican immigrants, first gen, receiving currently a bachelor's in social work from Texas State University. Listeners, this conversation with Lorena was fun because it was really interesting to me to when her work came across my desk. I was like, wait, we talk about such sexual health and politics, and we talk about what? Pleasure in politics? And so it was fascinating to explore this intersectional career that Lorena has chosen to go into. And I think you're going to learn a lot. So, sin más, here's my conversation with Lorena Rodríguez Banda. Lorena, welcome to Café con Pam.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. How are you? Where are you tuning in from?
I'm in San Antonio, Texas. I'm born and raised here, but I just moved back from Miami a couple months ago.
Hmm.
So
And what is your heritage?
I'm Chicana. So I'm a daughter of immigrants. Both of my parents are from Mexico, but I was born and raised in San Antonio.
Did they land in San Antonio? Your parents when they got here?
I think they met here, yeah, because I know my mom traveled. She crossed like twice. I think once by herself, and then the second time she crossed, she came back to go get her sister or something.
As we
My
do.
parents are not. Yeah, my parents are not really open with like their story, so I try not to ask them too many questions because I don't know how they deal with like all that trauma. But yeah.
So you were born and raised in San Antonio. Like you've been here there your whole life.
Yes, so I've been here my whole life. I was born and raised on the south side. What's up, Five Palms? Um, but I moved out once I went to college. I went to college in Texas State University, which is in San Marcos, which is just depending on where you live in San Antonio. Where I live, it's like an hour and a half.
So not far.
Yeah, it's in the middle of Austin and San Antonio, so we get the best of both worlds living there. And then right after college, came back home for like a year, I want to say. And then I moved to New York City in 2020, peak pandemic. Um, it was a time I literally moved March 8th, and then I think March 15th, we got quarantined.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy.
Wow.
Mhm. I stayed there for a couple of years after that.
So did you even get to enjoy the city?
Well, 100%. I was living my life in New York City, especially with like, I know as bad as that sounds with the pandemic. I made friends with a lot of locals, especially in 2021. So my background is in political organizing. So I got to meet a lot of people that were actually born and raised in New York City. My favorite candidate had to be, I want to say it was the third race that I worked in New York City. It was in Brooklyn. Shirley Paul for New York City. She's still talk to her to this day. She's my friend, my mentor. I love her. And she's also a Haitian woman. So I got to like really immerse myself with like her culture, her family. So it was a good time.
How did we get into politics?
For me, growing up on the South Side, I just saw how poorly we were treated because of where we grew up and how we look like. I saw how poorly my parents were treated too. There was a lot of times whenever we would go out. I remember this one specific time. It was at Chick-fil-A drive-through. Um, and my mom was ordering. We pulled up to the drive-through window, and I forgot what had happened, but basically it was a white lady at the window, and she tells my mom, speak English, and slams the window in her face. And my mom was speaking English. She just has a really thick accent. So moments like those, I was just like, okay, like this isn't okay.
How old were you?
That's a great question. I think I had to be like 15.
Oof.
But it's happened before that too. I think the youngest that I remember it happening was like 10.
And San Antonio is very brown
Yeah,
ish.
yeah. Depending on where you live, I think San Antonio and Texas, just in general, is very still like segregated.
Yes.
So the north side of San Antonio is very white,
Mm,
and that's a part of the community that we were at the time because we had to go shopping or somewhere.
for sure.
Um, so again, it just depends where you're at. But then again, there's also racism within the Latino
Of
community itself.
course.
So there's that whole other topic.
It's a whole other conversation. So you're 15. The drive-through lady shuts the drive-through window at your mom. Do you have a conversation? What goes through your mind?
I cuss her out. I cuss her. No, like I cuss her out. I think in that moment, like my instincts just were like, no, you're not gonna do that to my mom.
So mom was driving and you were in the passenger seat?
I think yeah, it was only me and her. She was getting me food, and I just remember cussing the lady out. And there was no conversation after that. I think a lot of times, especially as a daughter of immigrants, our family tends to like push our feelings aside.
Yes. Swallow them up.
Yeah, so we never really had conversations around that. But as I got older and I thought about those moments, I see how they affected my mom, and I feel for her, and especially me too. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. Again, I try to have those conversations with my mom now, and she doesn't really open up. I know with my dad, I try to ask him, he's like, ¿Y por qué quieres saber? I'm like, so yeah, there's not really conversations around that.
Totally. And I think we also need to give our parents a lot of compassion and grace because it's painful. And especially when they've not had language to discuss when people are mean or bullying, even. I have been in places like family dynamics and fiestas and, you know, gatherings where somebody, a younger person, maybe un primo o prima, they're like, ay, es que ahorita está mucho el bullying, and the older people are like, bullying? Like, no, when I was young, there was no bullying. We would just like get up and go to work. And you're like, wait,
Yeah,
but there was bullying. We just didn't call it that. And so
exactly.
there's no language that they have to kind of like go on with these conversations with, which could also be frustrating sometimes for us, no? Like, dang, I'm trying to help you, but you're not letting me.
Yeah, no, and it's so crazy that we're talking about this because I literally just had a conversation with my sister yesterday. So I'm the youngest of three older sisters.
Okay.
My older sister is 43. I'm 27.
¿Y puras niñas?
Todas niñas.
Okay.
7 nieces and nephews. 5 of them are boys.
Oh, wow.
No, I don't like it. I'm like, we need more girls because I was like, that's enough boys for this family. So yeah,
That's funny.
it is. It's crazy. I was just having this conversation with my sister yesterday because we were talking about like the whole immigration stuff and how Trump is deporting like not only people who have a record, but it doesn't matter. Like it's not about status or anything. He's just trying to get rid of our community. And we were talking about my dad because he does have his green card, and she was just telling me like, oh, I was trying to talk to my mom about it, like mom doesn't like really say anything. I'm like, dude, mom's the way that she is.
Mhm.
There's trauma and anxiety around this,
Yeah.
and she's gonna react differently than what we want her to do. Even if she's trying to like dismiss it, she's not doing it purposely. Like she's just trying probably not to get like anxious or anything like
Yeah.
that.
They don't have tools.
Yeah,
For sure.
exactly.
For sure. And I think this is where our generation and millennials, Gen Zs come in with we we must remind ourselves to give our parents a lot of grace because we don't know what they went through when they got here.
Yeah,
We don't know, however, because you said they met here. We don't know what kind of history happened back then, especially in Texas. Texas is so problematic. And I mean, all the states, but Texas is like kind of like at the tippy top of like so many things. And many times I think the younger generations, could get frustrated with their parents. And it's also maybe an opportunity for us to be like, how could I, like, you cussed that lady out when she yelled at your mom. Like, maybe your mom doesn't have the strength, the power, the know how, the tools to make things happen, but we do.
yeah,
It's this kind of like teeter totter, this like dichotomy of how do we help them, but at the same time, how do we stand up for it? It's frustrating.
yeah.
It's kind of like weird.
It is. And I think it's just, again, finding that balance of like, okay, I'm going to do what I can for my community. These are my experiences. And then just having, like you said, having compassion for our parents. I'm very big on my parents who they are, and they did what they could to survive
Hmm.
and whatever, whenever we were growing up or whatever. I forgive them because just thinking about it now, like I'm 27, and if I would get to pregnant right now, that's a teen pregnancy for me because it's a lot. And then now navigating a new country, a new community, it's just too
New
much.
language, new
Yes, exactly.
currency, like ways to get
Yes,
paid, like so many things.
exactly.
Totally. So you go through this situation, and I'm sure there were many other instances where you got to witness firsthand injustice. And so
Mhm.
that leads you into going into politics. But how do you know that's kind of like the way?
That's a great question for me. I just knew that I wanted to help my community, and I knew I could do that through politics. So the original plan for me was to work with policy, go to DC, work on Capitol Hill. So I started talking to my friends at the city council office here in San Antonio because I did an internship with them. And they're like, oh, you need to know people in order to get in Capitol Hill. So you need to start campaigning, like working on campaigns. So I started off as a volunteer on Jessica Cisneros for Congress, Texas 28. And I think 2 months later or 3 months later, they hired me on as her San Antonio organizer.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was my first job out of college. Well, that's a lie. I was a bottle girl for a couple months after college because I really couldn't get a job. And then I got that job with Jessica. And from that moment, I just knew that I wanted to do that work, just helping communities understand like voter education, um, persuading them to go out and vote and why it's important to vote, especially in areas like Laredo. I feel like a lot of times like border towns are forgotten about,
Mm,
and people really don't try to access that community and talk to them. Um, And then again, right after that, I moved to New York and I started another congressional race. So I've been doing a bunch of races. I've done over 9. I've worked in New York City, DC for Emily's List. And then right after that, I moved to Miami and I worked on a couple races there.
How did we get into reproductive health?
For me, there are things that happened during my college experience, and just accessing reproductive health was very challenging, especially because I didn't have insurance. So I was like, okay, there's a gap in this. And then I always say, like, our bodies are very political. Um, with the government trying to put laws on our bodies on what we could do, how we can do it, when we could do it, and again just accessing those types of resources. So my very first time working with reproductive justice has to be with Emily's List. um, Again, they're the largest democratic pro-choice organization here in America. I was their training manager for a couple of months, and from that moment I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. But backtracking a little bit, with sex and politics, I got into sex tech. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you've heard about that before.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so I got into sex tech whenever I was in New York City. I started listening to The Future of Sex by Bryony Cole. So she's the top sex tech leader right now. And I got into her sex tech school program, and I was able to really just network with a lot of people within that industry and just figure out how I can merge sex and politics together.
And what came out of that?
My newsletter. I started doing my newsletter. It's called the P Files, which is a sex positive newsletter for Latinas and other BIPOC women. I honestly just talk about my experience as a Latina growing up, what figuring out what like pleasure looked like and felt like for me, the challenges that I've gone through when accessing reproductive health, women's health, and just talking about sex toys and decensoring men.
So Charo is the current Florida state manager for the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice. And we had a whole
Mhm.
conversation about reproductive justice and how it affects Latinas and why it's so important for us to have awareness of it. Which, to bring it back to your story, how does a daughter of immigrants who don't talk about anything feel safe to go into the sex space, sexuality space? Because given that, I mean, I'm talking from my perspective, you tell us yours. There's a lot of shame around it. There's like no conversations, there's no education about it. There's a lot of you kind of like have to fend for yourself and figure it out and ask your friends. And, you know, school doesn't do us any good. So, how did you find that it was, how did you feel safe within yourself to be like, okay, I'm going to go in this field and it's going to be fine?
That's a great question. Again, I think it's just going back to experiencing some hardships during college when it came to my body, and just thinking to myself, like, damn, like if I would have had conversations around pleasure and sex and STD, STI checks, whatever, um, maybe I could have made different choices for my body and myself and my sexual experiences. And just again, making more educated choices. I don't blame my family at all, especially like my mom. Again, those are for not having those conversations again with me, because again, I have to think about, okay, like maybe my mom didn't have the privilege to sit down with her
Yeah.
mom, and yeah, it's just
Nobody
generational
talked to her about
things.
it. How could she?
Exactly. And I don't blame her for anything like that, because again, like that's all generational trauma. Um and I think I just made a decision like, okay, nobody's doing this. Nobody's talking about sex and politics, but I am. I don't care how many people are going to look at me like, what the fuck? Like, she's talking about sex. Like, I don't care how many people look at me sideways or anything like that, but this is an important conversation that we need to have. And then again, it goes back to starting my newsletter. That's where I felt safe talking about my experiences and just bringing awareness to the topic that it's okay to talk about sex and it's okay to have sex.
Mm,
Because again, I had so much shame whenever I was having sex in college. I'm like, fuck, I shouldn't be doing this.
I
Like,
need to be married. How dare I?
exactly. I'm gonna get pregnant. Well, I was on birth control and all of that. And I was using condoms and all of that. But still, you still have that voice in the back of your head. Like my dad would always say, "No, what would he say? He would be like, "No vengas para atrás con tu domingo siete."
Mm.
So that always stuck to me. I'm like, fuck, I can't get pregnant.
So it's almost like you have sex and shame.
Yes. So, and again, it's not just me, like just talking to a lot of my,
Oh, it's everyone.
yeah, especially down south, because then you talk about, you throw in religion,
Yeah.
you throw in education that's non existent,
Marianismo,
everything.
for sure.
Yes.
Like, how dare you be? I talk about the culture and all of those influences: Marianismo, machismo, the patriarchy, religion, like all the isms influence
Yeah.
so much how our bodies are policed all the time, and how free we and safe we feel or not when we make choices. And it's kind of like sometimes, and I think of my college days of also feeling the shame. I would hear my grandma be like, this thing is out of wedlock. This act is not blessed. Like,
Yeah.
and there's this,
Exactly.
it's almost not enjoyable, you know?
Yeah.
So before we move from the conversation around Texas, I was reading your newsletters and something wild that I was like, wait, what? And I don't know if this is still true, because you had an article linked from 2023, which, listen, 2023 wasn't too long ago.
Hmm.
Texas has some weird laws. So to this day, Texas can regulate how many sex toys you own. This includes dildos, vibrators, wands, beads, whatever it is. So, already in the 21st century, a court case decided that you cannot have more than 6 sex toys. You could have more if you're selling them, but you will need a permit. What?
So crazy. And then you could just pull up anywhere and get a gun.
I know.
Like, does not make sense. I think there was just another, I don't know, I think it was just in Texas. Recently there was some Republican officials trying to ban sex toys in Target, Walmart, and like CVS.
Why? Because it's converting kids to sex. I don't know.
It's crazy. I know, it's so crazy. I don't understand it. But then again, like, this is why I always preach we have to talk about sex and politics, because our bodies are political. A lot of times when it comes to reproductive justice, like, we have to talk about sex whenever it comes with reproductive justice. Like, it goes hand in hand. Everything's intersectioned. So
Totally. Okay, let's take a quick coffee break and then we'll keep talking about why this is important.
Sabrosura pa' tu que.
So, Lorena, do you drink coffee?
iced coffee, honestly, it doesn't do anything to me.
You're an iced coffee person? We haven't had one of you in a long time.
Yes, I'm an iced coffee person. You know, it's so crazy. My mom would drink coffee every morning growing up, and I think
She
she
did?
let me try it. Yeah,
Okay.
she let me try it, and I just didn't like it. But I think once I got to college, that's when I started liking iced coffee. But honestly, it's more like a sweet tooth thing than I need coffee.
And you don't get jittery, it doesn't wake you up.
No, it doesn't do anything.
Wow.
Yeah, I've converted to matcha though. I'm a
Okay.
matcha girly now.
Nice. Hot or cold?
Cold always. I don't like hot drinks.
No?
That I typically just drink like hot teas like in the morning and at night, but everything else cold.
Like during your day to day, it's cold matcha? Iced matcha?
Yes, with vanilla oat
Nice.
milk.
Matcha's great. I had a little phase where I was into matcha because it's great for antioxidants. The thing is that tend to, whatever people call it, fast. I tend to not eat until like 10 a.m., but I'm up at 5. And so
Yeah,
I needed to have a drink that I could have that's not going to upset my tummy. And because matcha has like so much antioxidants, it makes me throw up. And it's a thing that green tea has.
that's interesting.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and it's like there's something happening in the stomach that if you have green tea, and maybe if I do matcha without milk, then it happens. If I do matcha with milk, then the fat of the milk kind of like settles before. But there's something in matcha, in green tea specifically, that it's not recommended for people to drink green tea in ayunas, in without any food first.
That's crazy. I did not know that. Well, in I fucked up in New York because there was a year that I was just drinking coffee on an empty stomach.
Oh.
And I should not have been doing that. It fucked me up bad, like my gut. But yeah, no, like I try to eat every time before I drink like matcha or coffee now because never again.
And so you make your matcha every morning?
This is so bad. I buy it. I need to get a matcha kit. I probably spend so much money buying matcha. Well, I think it's the fact that I love going to a coffee shop and getting like, I don't know. I just
It's a
love
good
that whole
ritual.
little, exactly.
Listen, if that's the thing that you spend money on, so be it. I am drinking. Do you want to give a shout out to your coffee shop?
Ooh, there's so many. Let me shout out in every city. Right now, it's matcha. What's it called? Matcha Maiko here in San Antonio. But in Miami and DC, there's this place called Maman. Honestly, top tier matcha. If you're in Miami, there's a place in Wynwood that just opened up last year. Super good. Maman again. You need to go. And then there's another location in DC in I forgot where, but it's in DC. Super good.
Amazing. On my end, I'm drinking water now because we're past 11, which is my cutoff now. I feel like over time, we're episode 406. And when we started Kava Kumpam a long time ago, it was like, yeah, I can drink coffee until 4 p.m. I don't know if I ever said that, but it's been slowly kind of like getting sooner and like earlier and earlier when my cutoff is. For a long time, it was 2 o'clock, sometimes 3. Then it went to 1 p.m., then it to 12, and now we're at 11 a.m.
That's good though.
Yeah, I mean, boundaries. However, listeners already know I'm in this much, like, really good relationship with cacao right now because it's the plant medicine I didn't know I needed. And she called me in and I listened, and I've been enjoying her, and she's been so supportive. And this morning I had some delicious cacao mixed with lavender. And so I've been playing with like how I brew my cacao, and I've even added blueberries to it.
Ooh. Do you what is it called? Can you saute blueberries? Do you put them like
I don't saute the blueberry. I just like drop them in there. And it's like for some people are like, that's weird, like warm hot blueberries, like you cook them in the water basically. But I'm like, you have blueberry pie, you know? Like
exactly? That sounds good, honestly. I need to try that.
yeah. So this morning I had like some fun cacao. Okay, let's get back to the show. Let's talk about something we all deserve: financial empowerment. Whether you're tackling debt, planning for retirement, or starting that dream business, navigating your finances can feel overwhelming. But it doesn't have to be, thanks to savvy ladies. Savvy Ladies is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women like you take control of your financial future. They offer free resources, webinars, and my favorite, a free financial helpline where you can connect one on one with trusted financial experts. And yes, it's completely free. Whether you're just starting your financial journey or need guidance on a specific challenge, Savvy Ladies is here to provide quality and trusted advice you can count on. So why wait? Visit savvyladies.org today and connect with the financial helpline to get the personalized support you deserve. Your journey to financial independence starts here. That is savvyladies.org. Your path to financial freedom can start today. So, Lorena, you get into politics, you realize there's this intersection between um, sexuality and politics. Has there ever been pushback? Have you received pushback from the world?
Mm, maybe I don't think like into my face, but I think about what I post on LinkedIn and my social media, and I probably didn't get certain jobs because I post sex positive content and because of my
Mm.
newsletter. So I do think in my head there probably has been pushback, and I'm just thinking about the rejection emails that I've gotten because of some jobs and stuff like that. So
So tell us what is sex positive for the people that may not know, because we have listeners actually from 18 years old all the way to 55, and so let's define sex positive.
yeah, for me, and this is just for me, I'm super big on creating your own definitions. Um, I don't really like to follow how people define like certain topics. But for me specifically, sex positive means being open to accepting what pleasure feels like and looks like for me. And also just being open and understanding that what pleasure looks like and feels like for me doesn't necessarily look like for the next person. And then just having that understanding and accepting them for who they are and what they like.
Mm. And what's the difference between sexuality and sensuality for you?
For me, sensuality, when I think about sensuality, I think of how to be sexy. Like I think of like pole dancing. So I'll give you a little story. Whenever I was in New York City, I also did modeling. I was in music videos. I did modeling for Daniel's Leather.
Nice.
Yes, so I did a couple of gigs, and for me, that was tapping into my sensuality. Because growing up, I feel like there are certain ways I couldn't dress because men would look at
Mm.
me or like, oh, es que hombres te miran or whatever. Like I couldn't really wear like short dresses, not expose my body in that sense, and just like not be able to like move my body in different ways and like dance and stuff. So for me, modeling was a way for me to tap into my sensuality. I'm very grateful for those experiences because it just made me own my sexiness. And it's also just crazy to see how different Latino cultures answer to sensuality. Because I had a Dominican friend in New York City. She was a singer. She did a music video with me, and her mom was there too. And I remember her mom being like, "No, move your body like this. You gotta do that." Like she was just so open and free. I'm like, "Damn, my mom would
Yeah.
never." My mom, Lorena, ¿qué estás haciendo? Like you cannot be doing. It's just so crazy to see how different cultures react to sensuality.
Totally.
Um, and then sexuality for me, again, it goes back to figuring out what I like sexually and owning that.
Do you think the more humans step into their sensuality, the more we can also tap into the politics of it?
100%. I'm reading this book right now. It's like right up here. It's called Naked by Fancy Feast. She's a burlesque, well, I think she was a burlesque worker in New York City. And she just talks about how sex sells.
Mm.
Also, sex is political. Like, you can't be too sexy because then you're defined as something else. Like, you're a slut, you're whatever it may be. Um, so yeah, I do believe owning your sensuality taps into that political, because again, you're owning your body and you're taking back that power and that pleasure, because pleasure is political. So
Pleasure is political. And I love that you mentioned how, where was your friend from?
she was Dominican.
And that's something that I've noticed, that in my like super deep research about Galleta culture, there's Caribbean women, and specifically
Mhm.
talking about women, is they are much more, they lean a lot into their sensuality, very much. And Mexico and Central America, South America is different. So South America tends to be kind of like on the side. And of course, these are generalities, right? Like there's always exceptions. And many times, culturally speaking, Mexico, Centro America, probably, this is based on like limited data that I have, religion plays a big part. And in the Caribbean, there's not like Catholicism is not as, or Christianity in general, is not
Mhm.
as prevalent in a way, like it's been oppressed in Mexico, for example. I'll talk for myself as a Mexican.
Mhm.
And so I do notice I have also Caribbean friends, and it's really fun to see them how free. It's like, bro, let's go. And
Yeah,
I think this is where, as we gather together, as we continue to meet each other, have conversations, be in spaces with each other, we can mirror what it's like to be free, which is another form of resisting.
exactly. And again, owning that pleasure,
Hmm.
um, taking back that power. And I'm so grateful to have lived in New York City for a couple years, because it really opened my mind and it showed me a different side of like, hey, it's okay to be like open and free, and just be sexual with it and be sexy with it and own that.
Totally. And for me, for example, I tend to hide my body a lot because I grew up in Mexico City. I had to take the subway. El metro, like, if you really want an experience, take, I would say, I don't know, La Línea de Bellas Artes, probably. Like La Línea del Centro. Take the subway. I don't know. I've taken the subway in New York City. It's very different. So New York City is like a whole experience, like you're in a different world. El metro en la Ciudad de Mexico is very different. And many times it was touched in the subway. And so this is a trauma response that I just hide it because
Hmm.
my body was objectified. My body was objectified so many times in so many ways, not just by the people
Hmm.
on the streets, but even by my family. Like
Hmm.
the apodos that we get, like it's always related to your body. You get nicknames related to your body, and that is so harmful. Now that I do inner niña work, I'm like, dang, like she was in pain because,
Yeah.
the bullies were bullying for real.
No, yeah, and I 100% understand. I think that's something I still struggle with too, like not hiding my body, and being comfortable in my own skin no matter how I look like. Trust me, New York City subways is no joke either. Like, I'm so grateful. I'm very grateful and fortunate that I had my car in New York City.
Nice.
I Yeah, I did not. There was like once in a blue moon I would take the train. I would drive everywhere. But I think about how I would dress in New York City, especially like on Halloween and like all these other fun events. And I'm like, I would never dress like that around my family or
Right.
even hear this, because like it's so conservative.
Totally. And then the comments and all the things. Yeah. So, what are the 5 things that people can do to begin resisting how politicized our bodies are and our sexuality?
That's a great question. I would say one, start educating yourself on the different laws, especially now that are being put out. So what I would do, I would go. I think there's a thing on Google that you could get specific emails, like email news sent to you, like alerts. So what I do, I put women's health, reproductive justice, and just like sexual health laws that are being passed, and I get all those alerts. So one, educate yourself, read books. Um, Two, I would say sit down with yourself and figure out what pleasure looks like and feels like for you, whether that's just exploring different ways with sex toys, without sex toys, whatever it may be, is just learning about
Mm.
yourself and taking your time. Take a pole class, take a heel class, whatever it may be, but learn about your body. Three, I would say start immersing yourself with individuals that embody that. You are who you surround yourself with. I'm a big believer on that. So whenever I had my friend in New York City who was Dominican, I loved hanging out with her because she was just so open and free with her body, and she owned her sexuality and or her sensuality, I'm sorry, and that rubbed off on me.
Yeah.
Four, I would say, ooh, five is hard. Four, I would say, sign up for my newsletter. I was like, sign up for my newsletter. I talk about sex all the time, but it's just not, I think sex is just not talking about sex. Sex is also talking about mental health, and how that plays into it, like the emotions, the physical, STD, STI, and all the good stuff. So I talk about that, and I also have a YouTube where I do sex toy reviews. So like, if you're unsure what sex toy you should buy, go look at my reviews, and you can see which one fits best for you. And lastly, I would say have fun with it. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Um, I know there's so much shame. There's still moments that I have shame whenever it comes to having sex and all this other stuff. I mean, I have a boyfriend now, so it died down a little
Mm.
bit, but it was just there's still so much shame around sex. So just start practicing self love and be compassionate with yourself. And like, sex is okay. Like, sex is 100% normal.
We wouldn't be here without it.
Exactly. And sex is way more than reproducing. Like, sex can be, you can have sex to have fun, not just to
For
reproduce.
sure. Which is what for a long time it was painted as.
I do feel like it still
It still
is too
is.
within the Latino community.
For sure. And another thing that I read is that women are less likely to orgasm because of lack of education.
Hmm.
Tell me how that's political.
It goes back to not knowing, not having the resources and the education behind um, your
Mm.
body. I feel like a lot of times when we talk about sex education, especially in schools, I literally just had another conversation with a sex educator from Nigeria. She lives in Nigeria, and we talked about how sex education here in the States, like for me, I just remember going into a room that was taught by like a coach,
Mm-hmm.
a football coach, and putting on a video. And whenever it came time to talk about women and like periods, the boys were
Yeah.
separated. But it never, and we talked about abstinence only, like it's the only way. So we really never talked about sex and
Pleasure.
the what it comes to, yeah, pleasure, that you could experience pleasure on your own. So I would say again, like educating yourself on your body, educating yourself around the laws, and um just gaining that power back,
Mm.
because political and pleasure is also power.
100%. And something that I learned a while ago and it like blew my mind is that the average age for boys to encounter porn is 8 years old.
Hmm.
And we don't watch the sex ed video until high school. And so I remember when I was in high school in LA and we watched the video literally by the health class coach that was like, I don't know, the baseball team coach.
Yeah.
I had two guy friends, and they were laughing so much at the video. And I was like, "Why are you laughing?" And they're like, "Because that's not how it works. We've seen all the movies." And I'm like, and now looking back, like I didn't know at the time, but now looking back, I'm like, it was so backwards. This is this false advertisement of what boys start watching so early on, and they think that this is the reality and truth when it's not it, which we can get into like the porn industry and like so many other topics, but this is why I hearing you kind of like reflecting back what you're telling us is to look into what decision makers are making happen to make sure that we are as empowered as possible with what the government is doing or not, or taking away from us.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think your point with like young boys like what like watching porn at a young age, I feel like it's also like a lot of times these bills are not passed or anything like that because they're afraid that kids are gonna encounter whatever. Especially like with TikTok, Instagram,
Right.
social media being TikTok being banned. And it's like now it's even more
Yeah.
worse. Like with social media, like I'm pretty sure the average age now of a young boy or whoever watching porn is lower than 8.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But thinking about people do have access to social media and sometimes they don't have like the parental controls or whatever. Um again, like we can't escape from the topic of
The
sex.
realities
It's
of it,
gonna
yeah.
exactly. So I think it's just again being educated on the laws and like sitting down with yourself like okay, like it's important to have this conversation with my son, my daughter, and talk to them about like if they do come across porn or whatever, that sex is not like that. And then sex is also what you make it, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think to bring it back to the beginning of our conversation of like our parents don't talk about things. This is where we can also come in to say, well, we have now more groundedness within ourselves. We have more safety. We have the language even to have these conversations with our younger people, kids, nibblings, whatever you name it. And so, how are we going to be proactive and have the conversation instead of avoiding it? Because we could also fall into that same generational passing of like, aquí no se dice, aquí no se habla esto, right?
Yes. So it's so funny that you say that because literally, November around Thanksgiving, I have again, like I said, I have 7 nieces and nephews. The oldest one is 13, and he came up to me. He was like, "Yeah, is it worth having a girlfriend? Like, you think it's worth it being like in a relationship?" And I look at him, I'm like, Carlos. And I had to tell myself, I'm like, no, he's growing up. It's okay. Like, but I still see him like my baby.
Yes.
Like, why are you talking to girls? Like, no. I'm like, no. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I was like, I shouldn't have reacted like that. Ask me again. Now I'm calm. Like I could talk to you about this. And we had a conversation and it was just so it felt nice to just be like, look, it's up to you. Like if you want to have a significant other right now, that's great. But just remember, like, make smart decisions and decisions for yourself and that you're young, like you're 13, like you have your whole life to date. But if you want to do that, then that's 100% fine.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like it's all about like catching ourselves
Yeah.
and putting that ego aside.
Well, and it's been fácil repetir what you were told before. Like
Yep.
it's kind of like a default to repeat what or like I catch myself sometimes. I'm like, do I sound like my mother? Because it's what we grew up with. Entonces ahí is where like how people talk about cycle breaking. It's where you like that breath that you are like, hold on, let me just get myself back together
Yeah.
and then make the choice to not go that way.
Exactly. And also apologizing. Like I said sorry. Like I was like, I'm sorry. I should not have reacted like that. I was like, I just still see you as my baby. I was like, no, it's okay. So again, like having like those apologies, because I know a lot of times, especially in immigrant families, like apologies are not
Oh, no.
a thing.
El orgullo es
Yeah.
bien fuerte.
Hmm.
So tell us all the places and spaces where we can find you.
Yes. So the easiest one, I have a lot. So the two easiest places is Instagram. My at handle is at Love Me Lorena. If you follow me and go on my bio, there's a link tree that links my newsletter, my website, events that I'm doing around Texas, and hopefully soon around the US.
Yay.
Um, and then another easy way to find me is going to lorenabanda.com. And again, all my socials are linked through there. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Last few questions. Do you have a remedio you want to share with us?
Yes. So I feel like a lot of times it's not talked about, especially whenever talking about Caribbean cultures. Whenever I was in New York, I would tell my Dominican friends about like when my mom would rub me with an egg,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, "What? Like, what the fuck?" They're like, "Why she do that?" I'm like, and I had to like
Es una
explain it.
limpia.
Exactly. To this day, like if I feel sick, I'm like, Mom, bárrame como un huevo, because like I feel like somebody gave me ojo. Um, so I want to share that one. I think it's one that's not really talked about, and a lot of like different Latino cultures don't really know.
La barrida del huevo es muy buena. And then you crack it on a glass of water and then you can read it.
It's legit, and make sure you dump it out in the toilet. Do not keep it for long because we don't need that bad
Mm-hmm.
energy.
It needs to go away from you. I love that. Do you have a quote or mantra that you live by right now?
Right now, I'm in the season of this is not where I want to be, but this is exactly where I need to be.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm in that season of my life because again, I was living in Miami. I did not want to move back home to Texas, but I just had to, and I had to make that very tough decision and put my ego aside. So I'm not where I want to be, but this is exactly where I need to be.
I love that. It's very accepting. It's not conforming, but it's accepting.
Yeah, it's just shit happens. Um, like I'm building my career around something that's not being done. I feel like I'm the very first person to talk about sex and politics to this extent. So just being patient with myself and just trusting God has a bigger plan for me.
Mm-hmm. So good. And do you have a productivity tip, trick, or tool that you want to share with us?
For me, and I did this in college. So if I'm working on projects or whatever it may be, if I don't know it by 12 a.m. or I don't have it done by 12 a.m., I'm not going to know it or it's not going to get done. So I shut down everything and then I go to bed and pick it back up the next day with a fresh
So you have
mind.
a boundary of closing it down. Nice.
Hmm.
And the last question is, how are you taking a restorative pause today?
Ooh, that's a great question. You know, I've been struggling with being 100% transparent. I've been struggling with sleep for the past month, honestly, month and a half. I haven't really been sleeping that well. And I think it's because I'm stressed right now. My contract ended back in November. So I'm unemployed right now, looking for new opportunities. And given the fact that everybody's becoming unemployed right now, um, so yeah, for me, I think what I'm gonna do is start winding down earlier than I usually do. So probably ending my days like around 4 or 3.
Mm,
Um, and just going from there. Because again, I haven't been sleeping that well, so I'm doing something that's
stressing you out,
contributing.
for
Yeah.
sure. Sleep
So
is important.
mhm,
I always
exactly.
think about how one of the biggest torture tactics is sleep deprivation.
I've been torturing
And
myself
so,
then.
yeah, so when I don't like, I also like, there's times in my life, like sometimes it's when the full moon happens and I'm like, wait, I didn't sleep at all. I often think about how it's like you lose your mind. Sleep is like so needed.
Yeah, and then you don't become productive because then you're just tired and then you wake up late and then
Nothing's
yeah.
working for sure.
Hmm.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming to Cafe con Pam. Anything else you would like to share that I didn't ask?
I think the last thing that I would say is live your life and fuck what people have to say. Just do you.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for all you do, and we'll be checking all your things out. We'll link them in the show notes so listeners don't have to frantically write things down. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you.
All right, listeners, that was the episode. Espero que te haya gustado. I hope you enjoyed it. And if this podcast has ever inspired you, here are some ways you can support us so we can keep going for many, many more episodes. Free ways: you can leave a rating and a review on whichever podcast app you listen to. It helps a ton. Some people are like, does it really? Yes, it does, because the algorithms then pick up your feedback and or your stars, and then that gets shared with other people looking for something to listen to. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube. If you have come across this and you're like, what is this? Just go to the channel, subscribe, leave a comment, share it with someone you love, because it also helps a ton. We've been doing this for a while, and your support means the world, and it's the only way for us to continue to expand and share our stories. Paid ways you can support us: you can join the supporters club, which allows you to get ad-free content, so all the episodes come ad-free. You can also enroll in Gather Circle. This is my annual program to help you break free from silence and reclaim your power. It's super fun. Gather is an online gathering space, kind of like a group program, but more so it's a co-created space. It really, Gather has, every time somebody new joins, it takes shape because your magic gets sprinkled in there. You can hire me to speak at your organization or company. You know, I am a life coach and I do lots of really fun experiences for people. And let's bring the conversation. Let's bring the conversation. Let's stay connected on the socials at Cafe Con Pan Podcast, on all the places and spaces, whatever you hang out. I'm not so much on TikTok, so you can try. Thank you so, so much for listening. Y como siempre, stay shining.
Sabrosura pa' ti que